Hello and welcome to the Quality Online Course Series, Course Activities and Student Engagement. This particular workshop aligns with the Quality Matters Standard number 5, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means later. But if you've been attending our Quality Online Course Series, we've been trying to kind of expand on the ideas of Quality Matters and their 8 general standards. So again, that may mean nothing to you, that may mean something to you, but I think we're going to have a great discussion this afternoon on what that is going to mean for everyone. My name is Tracy Miller, and I'm the Online Teaching Coordinator in the Faculty Development Instructional Design Center at Northern Illinois University. And I'd like to not only welcome my colleagues and companions from Northern Illinois University, but we've also opened up this workshop to the public, so I'd like to welcome our colleagues from other universities and our global participants. So glad to have you here and hope that you will be part of our discussion. So I'm going to go over what you can expect and what I'm going to expect from all of you this afternoon. We are talking about course activities and student engagement, so I'm really hoping that we will have active participants today via the text chat, maybe some activity with the whiteboard later on. You'll definitely have that opportunity to do that, so get ready for that. Next, be interactive and support one another in this workshop that is happening this afternoon. And by that, I mean you can support each other through the text chat area. So if there's something that you agree with, you can do a +1 and add the name of the person you agree with. That's kind of just an online shortcut. Or if you have a question for another participant, please support each other in that way. I am not the only person that has a voice here today, so be sure to, again, support each other. And then think about and reflect on what we're going over today and how you might incorporate some of these activities into your course. And, you know, how you can immediately apply them to your course, really whether it's face-to-face or online. I'm going to take just a moment to kind of let you reflect on what we're going to be doing this afternoon, but I'm also going to use that opportunity to just make sure that I catch up on my attendance a little bit, because I want to make sure that I don't fall behind on that. So my workshop objectives this afternoon is that you will be able to define active learning and how that relates to engagement. You're going to be able to describe the benefits of incorporating active and engaging components into your course, because I think it's important. We need to see those benefits to understand how they will help our students and how they're sort of worth the effort. There's going to be 3 types of interaction that we're going to talk about, so hopefully you have a better understanding of how they're different and how they relate to one another. And then, oh, we have whiteboard people already there. Don't make me turn it off early. And then finally, designing the your course to have more of these components within it. All right, so we've got some activity already. We can tell that folks can just read along with the slides just as well as I can talk about them. So here's where I want you to share a little bit about what you think it means to be active in a course. So please add those to the text chat area. I'll certainly be sharing with you what I think it means to be active in your own learning, but please share some ideas of what you think active means and what it looks like. Lots of ideas coming in. Thank you for your activity. And for the recording too, I'm also going to read some of these texts out so that you can refer to them later. Discussion forums. It means students are evaluating the relevance of the material in their own lives and worlds. Good, Amanda, I like that. Beth says collaborative with other learners. Janet is sharing that actually having students engage with the course content. They're actually flipping so quickly now. I love this. Such as what we're doing through the chat here. Lacey said demonstrate engagement with the material, either verbally or in a written reflection. Jamal, active through forums. Bill, creating connections and knowledge, making hypotheses and testing them, discussing ideas with them. Yes, I think we're sharing a lot of the same kind of thoughts, and you're really covering a lot of interesting points. Cho at the bottom says students asking questions. Yes, so they're even reflecting on maybe their limitations and asking thoughtful questions about that. You're all in the right place today, because this is exactly the sort of thing that we're going to be talking about this afternoon. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with everyone. And again, hopefully you're learning from each other just as much. Jamal just shared one last thing with creating special groups. That could even be groups that are interested in a particular topic or something. So yes, absolutely. Sort of the a definition maybe of active learning is any instructional method that engages the student in the learning process. So it has that word of process. It already sounds like it's got some action behind it. And then the second one is that it requires the student to participate in meaningful learning activities and reflecting on what they're learning. I'm going to just look back at the text chat, because I think someone literally said something about how learning and the activity should be something that is relevant to them. And that's what I think we mean by this idea of meaningful learning. And I pulled these definitions from Prince, an article, Does Active Learning Work? A review of the literature. And so, you know, active learning is something that definitely has some strong research behind it. One of the other things that the research really is critical about is that active learning environments must be student-centered. Many of the things that you touched on with your ideas on how learning can be active really is focused around the student and helping them become more engaged in their own learning. And so that kind of dovetails into another important concept in active learning environments, is that students must be responsible and accountable for their own learning. And there's different ways that we can do that as instructors or even course designers. But one of the things is that does not mean that we are suddenly unaccountable and unresponsible for their learning. It becomes our job then to help them facilitate their own learning and help support them, but really give them the space to be accountable for their own learning. So you're not off the hook just because active learning says that students should be responsible and accountable for their own learning. So those are some, like, we shared some ideas about what we thought active learning could be like, and now we're talking a little bit about maybe what those textbooks definitions are like. But let's now break it down into those types of interactions. It was one of our learning objectives, and I think we addressed it in some of our ideas in our initial kind of brainstorming session. But the three types that are typically talked about in online courses are faculty to student, faculty to content, and student to other students. And I think I said that second one wrong. Student to content is important. So again, I'm going to kind of just break these down into more manageable chunks maybe, and I'm going to talk first about the faculty to student interaction. And here's a bunch of different ways that you can interact with your students. And you can see the arrows that I've created on here are two ways. So it's just not faculty pushing out interaction to the students. Interaction just has that feeling that it is something that's definitely always working two ways. So how can you do that? There's some that are more one way than others, maybe, like an announcement or a reminder. But then the students can hear from you on feedback on their learning, but they can also give you feedback on their learning that will maybe help you adapt to what they are struggling with, perhaps, or other types of feedback that they may give you on how the course is put together. I just saw a text come in, so I want to address that. Yeah, Ramanpreet said, make them think. Yes, definitely ways to make them think. Maybe a little bit deeper about what you're presenting to them or what they're experiencing in the class. So again, here's just some information on types of interaction that you can build into your course that addresses this faculty to student relationship here. And please share any other ideas that you have incorporated possibly into your face-to-face course, your online course, or even something that you may have experienced as a student. But I want to be really practical in this particular workshop. So here are some tips for some faculty-student interaction. The first tip is to model any desired behavior that you are expecting with your students, whether that be that kind of the level of formality you want with the language, whether it be something that's presented, spoken, verbal, or more written. Whatever type of behavior, again, you're looking for, make sure you model that with your students. I'm sort of modeling some very friendly behavior. That's the way I like to conduct my workshops. I also make sure, try to model this behavior where I'm really paying attention to what you're saying. And so I'm trying to, again, model that expectation that I have for my students. Set clear expectations for whatever that interaction is. So if you have some kind of etiquette expectation, polite civil conversation, maybe how frequently you're going to expect feedback from your students or how frequently they can expect feedback from you, which ties right into that response time too. You know, let your students know ahead of time how that interaction is going to happen, and by thinking about these expectations ahead of time, it's really going to help foster that interaction and avoid any confusion. So our next type of interaction is student to content. Again, we've got these two-way arrows showing that, you know, they're really engaging with each other in different ways. And in some ways, it's kind of interesting to think about content being a of them, but it certainly can be. It's the way that they are sort of absorbing the content that we are delivering to them. And so I've again added sort of some ideas on ways that students can interact with the content, but I think giving them ways to do and apply are some of the most important ways to show that action and how they can engage in content. In some ways, I purposely made these words larger because I think some of them show some more action than other ones. But some of them definitely be a little bit more passive, like reading or watching a video. Maybe some of them are going to be a little bit more undertoned, which is some ways that you might motivate your students to become more engaged with the content. But again, I think the important ones are really allowing your students to be able to do something with the content that you're giving them. Janet said, students sometimes have difficulty understanding content unless they are provided with relevant and engaging ideas. Yes, they definitely want to experience that. And I think experience is a good way. They want to know how this is relevant to them and how this is going to inform them. And sometimes they really need to experience that. Thank you, Janet, for that very much. I'm going to give you some tips on how to do that. But again, please feel free to share with each other and support each other with any ideas about how you like to incorporate student-to-content interaction in your courses. And I think we covered this first tip in a way when we said that you know, there's a lot of different ways that you can create this interaction with your students, and a variety of content types are important for that. So even though I said that potentially reading or even viewing a video on the content may be very passive, it's still important to have that variety of content types. Students react differently to different content types, so you're giving them different students different opportunities, but maybe they're going to see it in just a slightly different way or from a slightly different perspective. So having that variety is important for students to become engaged in that content and feel connected to that content. Incorporate opportunities for practice. So if there's any way that you can give your students some way that they can practice an opportunity, maybe it's low stakes or you know, purely a practice activity before it becomes something that's maybe something that you're going to measure or assess. So that could be you know, maybe they're just gonna work their way through a simulation or practice a speech perhaps, or even write a draft of something that's going to be a more formal paper later on. That's going to help them to, again, have to kind of work through the content a little bit, maybe before you're again doing sort of that formal assessment of their learning. You're going to see set expectations come up as my tips because we are talking about quality online course design. And so while we are designing, while we are planning, while we are kind of putting together this online course, you really need to be intentional about building in this interaction. And so setting those clear expectations is going to be what really brings this up to a higher level. So let them know what activities are required. The other side of that is what activities are going to be optional. And let them know why, again, that relevance. Why is this activity required? And maybe why do I think you might be interested in an activity that's optional? Let the students know up front how those kind of are going to unfold. Give them a schedule of activities. Let them know what they're going to be doing over the course of the semester and what they're going to be doing week to week. Activities can definitely cross over into what an assessment is. An activity may be taking a quiz or completing a paper, but It also may be, again, like those practice activities or just that interaction with the content. So letting them know all the things that they're going to be engaged in is a best practice and a tip that I have for you this afternoon. Very important one. Let them know how the activities support your learning objectives. So again, so it doesn't feel like busy work to them, especially when they're having this interaction with the content. Let them know why this reading is important or why it's important to kind of discuss this topic with each other. You know, any of that, just let them know how this is supporting their learning objectives. Again, really points to that relevance for them. Okay, now I'd like to see a little bit more student-to-student engagement right now. So if you could share with me anything that you felt was maybe new to you that you hadn't thought about doing before. Take a few minutes to share that in the text chat area. Janet said, I like that you mentioned optional activities. Give students a sense of voice and how the course will help them learn. Yes, optional activities are really great too for somebody that maybe wants a little bit of an extended learning experience or something that really grabbed them. Maybe it's more relevant to their particular life. Lacey agrees with Janet, and she used the +1 and the smiley face. I love it. She also likes the choose your own adventure approach. Yes, choose your own adventure approach can be very difficult to manage, but can definitely give them that sense of responsibility for their own learning that we talked about early on. Kevin liked the low stake, low stress assessments. Yes, it's really starting to help them with that practice, gain some confidence, or even help you identify maybe some misconceptions, be able to address them, and then have the quality of their work even better when the higher stakes assessments come into play. Thank you all for sharing those ideas. Cho says, quiz is always efficient, but no student seems to like that. Well, right. We don't always give them things that they just like to do, though. But quizzes definitely have a purpose, especially if they align with what your learning objectives are. So let's talk a little bit about student-to-student interaction. And so I've created not this two-way arrow, but I've created kind of this loop around it because they're all kind of interacting with each other and supporting each other. And thank you for continuing to support each other in the text chat area. I said I wasn't going to be the only voice you heard from, so that sounds great. Thanks for supporting each other. So here's some ideas on how you might support each other in a online environment. And one of the ones that I'd really like to kind of pull out here, since you're already so great at supporting and discussing things with each other, is this idea that there's an informal or a social space for them to learn. In a face-to-face course, I often call it the hallway conversations or the before class and after class conversations, and it just sort of naturally happens. And so we need to be a little bit more intentional in our course design with creating these places and these spaces for students to be able to connect with each other in maybe an informal or social area. And so there's two reasons for that. First of all, we want them to feel connected and feel like there's a place that they can sort of have these hallway conversations. But we also want to make sure that these conversations don't start happening in more of our content-specific areas. So there's a variety of ways that we can provide these spaces. So please share any of those that you might have with each other. But I want to just chime in with the text category. Discuss the difficulties and issues that we may encounter regarding the course. discuss the difficulties and issues that we might encounter regarding the course. So I want to keep it kind of on the subject of interaction, because I think there can be a lot of difficulties and issues that we might encounter, you know, in a variety of subjects. But the difficulties that we might encounter involved in interaction would be uncivil behavior. So the students, I definitely encourage my students to be challenging and maybe slightly push back a little bit when they interact and discuss with each other, but I definitely want them to remain polite and respectful with each other. And so sometimes that's something that you sort of need to teach the students to do. I haven't come across any, but there are ways that you can kind of handle that. You can monitor a discussion board. Here at NIU, we use Blackboard, and so we have that ability to sort of review a discussion post before it goes to the other students. Again, because I haven't had that problem come up, I don't use that method unless I see something sort of creeping up, and then I usually address it with the student and remind them about the importance of having civil behavior in the classroom. And Janet is supporting and adding some into the text chat area, saying that that can be difficult for some students, especially when they don't know one another. How to challenge their peers, maybe provide an example. Yes, and that's a great idea, especially early in the semester, that we were actually talking about in the text chat earlier. Janet mentioned it to Kevin. If there's any way that we can set an example for our students about how they can sort of challenge each other politely, what I usually suggest is that they actually ask each other questions. So if they bring up a certain point and they want some kind of clarification, or they maybe want them to consider an alternative view, that they ask and challenge in sort of the form of a question, rather than just sort of blasting them and telling them that they're wrong and they have no idea what they're talking about. That can help that conversation become richer and more developed. So for my tips for student-to-student interaction, you want to sort of build a community of learners. Janet made mention that at first they don't know each other very well. And so, you know, you want to start to build that community. Is it going to be this huge community? Potentially no, but they are in a class together. At some level, they might have had an interest in the subject. They may be in the same program or the same discipline. And so any way that you can help foster that community is really helpful for at least a short term, for them to feel like they're a community of learners. Online learning can be isolating, so any way that you can help kind of bring them together is important. So I'm going to do that right now. So we do have a lot of folks from NIU, and so we belong to that special community, but we also have some folks from other universities. So please share in the text chat area the name of your institution or university that you're from now. And I think we'll find that we are members of the educational community, possibly the higher education community. Thank you, all of you NIU folks, and welcome Keith from Lipscomb University. Now, I talked a lot about the second one as far as giving them that space to have an off-topic conversation. So you can provide them with opportunities to do that in a couple different ways. You can definitely have a kind of off-topic discussion board, you can create a Facebook or some other kind of media, social media area for them to kind of engage. I don't use a Facebook in my course, but I do use a Twitter hashtag. So anytime I come across something that I think might be interesting to my course, I encourage students to follow me on Twitter, and then I use the hashtag. And so, you know, sometimes it's slightly off topic more than, you know, completely off topic. Again, welcome. It's great to hear from so many different places, but we're all part of that educational community together. And I promised that I would have these expectations as my tips for these different types of interaction. So again, we talked about what kind of issues could come up. Let them know what civil, responsible etiquette rules that you have in place. And then also let them know how often they need to respond to each other, and how meaningful this conversation about scope needs to be when they interact with each other, especially for those interactions that are more based on the content. Kevin, thank you for welcoming Jamal. It's nice to see, and Amanda, supporting one another again. So here are some of the different types of interactions, and you don't just choose one. You want to make sure that they're all sort of happening, and that they're maybe building. You know, we talked about certain things happening at the beginning of the course, and how it can become stronger and more developed and richer as the course goes on. So I want to give you some more practical strategies on how you can create these active learning environments. And so I found this resource from this particular resource from the Center of Research and Learning from the University of Michigan. And I look at this as, they call it a spectrum. I think of it as a continuum of maybe some very simple ways that you can incorporate active learning strategies into your course, all the way to some more complex ones. I think we have different comfort levels with them. We probably want to start with some more simple ones, especially again at the beginning of the course, or some things maybe that our students need to get a little bit more comfortable with. I also think some of these strategies you probably incorporated into your face-to-face courses. It's just a matter of kind of tweaking them a little bit to put into your online courses. So this really simple one I like is using a 1-minute paper. Have students read an article and then just kind of brain dump and write anything that they feel like for 1 minute, and then maybe submit it to you as an assignment or add it to discussion board. You're just kind of coming up with the activity and giving them a place to put it. All the way up to some more interesting ones, like maybe introducing a case study for your students. Case studies are great for that relevancy, especially if it's really specific to certain discipline. Again, you may have seen some of these. You may be interested in trying some more of these, but again, feel free to tag on to this resource to kind of get some more ideas about how these active learning strategies can be incorporated into your online course. Janet says, 1-minute paper works well in a private journal feature of Blackboard or as a reflection. Yes, that's another great place to have them put that. It's really just a matter of you know, who the audience is going to be for sharing this. So how are we going to incorporate some of these active learning strategies into our online course? And so In order to show you how to do that, I'm going to kind of walk you through this scenario a little bit. But I want to talk about the strategies that I thought about and that I discuss with faculty when they're thinking about putting some of these active learning things into their online course. And the first is to identify activities in which you already do that you just feel like the students get it. This is the thing that just, you know, you can see those light bulbs go off in their heads when they go through the activities. So you want to think about that and then think about, okay, now how can I add these great activities into my online course? And then whatever it is you want the students to be able to do, give them opportunities to do it. The comment earlier was that, you know, students don't like to do quizzes. I think they really want to be able to do something, and the quiz doesn't quite feel like they're applying what they know. And so if there's a different way that you can give them an opportunity to really do things that you want to see in them, definitely give them those opportunities. And then give them time to make meaning. So I'm going to pause again because I want to make sure that you have time to make meaning of this. So think right now about one of those activities that you already do where the students just really get it. And if it will help you do something, type it out into the text chat area. Okay, that was a very brief time to make meaning, but in a 1-hour workshop, you know, times might be a little bit shorter, but hopefully you jotted down a couple notes or thought about some things. Look at, you're already adding things. You just needed 2 more seconds to have to add something to the text chat area. Jamal says introducing themselves to others. Yes, having them with a getting acquainted sort of activity is good. Beth said applying these concepts to their real life. So yeah, maybe having them say, how do you think you can now do this in your real world? Amanda said, I see students really get it when they are involved in real-time face-to-face discussions with one another, often in small groups. I'm struggling to translate that into online formats. The discussion board isn't very dynamic. The discussion board has a different feel to it than a face-to-face. Face-to-face, you sort of need to jump in there and kind of go with your first thoughts, where a discussion board, you know, you can kind of maybe sit back and gather your thoughts a little bit more. So if that's really important to you, I would consider incorporating what we're doing this afternoon, and that's having a live synchronous session with your students. You can also give them the opportunity to do that in small groups, maybe just assign them different times and dates or something. So usually if there's something you think that you can really, that it's really beneficial, we can try to figure out a way to kind of pull that into the course. Jamal says, discussions more make the shy students write something. Yes, shy students are definitely more engaged in discussion boards, and those are the students that may never speak up in class. And then there's the ones that just kind of take over this discussions in the class, right? So for my example, sort of the scenario I'm going to go through with you, we're going to consider a role-playing activity. And so that's quite far up the list here in complexity. So I've tried to really break it down, but I really want you to give me some feedback on what you think of this activity. So it's a role-playing activity, which I discussed, and it has to do with community health. And what I want to make sure is that I'm addressing some very important things when I come up with this role-playing activity, because I don't just want it to be that, oh, they really loved that role-playing activity when I did it in my face-to-face course. I want to make sure it still has all those other elements that are important to the learning environment. So one of the most important ones is that they understand how it aligns with the learning objectives and their assessments, because how the students are being measured and how they're being graded are important to them and to you. So you want to make sure that not only do they understand how it aligns, but that it does actually align with your learning objectives and assessments. The other thing I look for early when I create any sort of active learning, I hate to say activity, but you almost want to say it like over and over again when we're talking about this, but any sort of experience that you're developing for the students, I love to make it really intentional. So I'll use words like action plan. Now, in this community health role play, having the students get into some groups, and they are each going to be assigned a role. So they're going to be a scientist, a public health official, and a community leader. And so I've designed this activity to be in groups of 3, and they each need to take on a role. They're going to brainstorm their action plan. Then they're going to write an action plan up, and then they're going to have their own reflection, because again, I want to provide them with that opportunity to make meaning behind this activity. The next thing I want to think about is what is the role of the student as an individual and as a team member, and what is my role in this activity as their facilitator and their supporter of how they're going to be engaged in this learning activity. So in the design of the activity, I want to make sure that I tell them a little bit about their roles. In this case, I even suggest that they have a team contract. So not only do they understand their role as a student, as an individual in a team, but what is their role within that team. It helps with some issues. We were talking about early what kind of issues could come up. Coming up with a team project or a group project can be tricky to manage, but it can be very, very valuable. So yes, issues come up, but one of the ways you can address it is through this team contract. Next, in introducing my role to the students, I want to make sure that I let them know what type of feedback they will get from me and the time that they will get it from me. And then giving them some outlines of what they will need to do, which we talked about, giving them sort of a schedule of activities that are going to happen. So I'm really looking, I'm almost looking back through my PowerPoint here, where I'm thinking about, you know, here are some of the really important strategies to use when you're creating this complex learning activity. And so I want to make sure that I'm really addressing these different things. So one of the things I always look for when I'm creating these opportunities to do is I pull out a great resource that I like, and it's from an individual called D. Fink, and he wrote a book called Creating Significant Learning Experiences, an Integrated Approach to Design. And he also has a 3-day workshop. Janet, you'll correct me if I'm wrong. 3-day workshop on how to create these significant learning experiences. And each year we try to send a few faculty to that. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely let us know over here at Faculty Development. You know, again, each year we send folks and they always come back really excited to kind of provide these opportunities for their students to do something. So he breaks it down to a couple different categories. He talks about some direct ways of learning, and so maybe more indirect or vicarious ways of learning. Janet is chiming in that yes, Defink's workshop is a 3-day intensive experience. Yes, you come away with it very energized and like exhausted at the same time. So here we have our direct and indirect. How do we provide the content to our students in these kind of environments? In a direct way, it might be something like using primary sources or original data. In this indirect way, we might have them look at some sort of secondary source, typically our lectures or a textbook, perhaps some websites or multimedia. As I'm kind of looking down this list, Defink, when he creates this is an adapted version of his table. He actually breaks out online learning as a separate category along with direct and indirect. I have a hard time doing that because my world is so blended now between online and face-to-face. And so I just kind of tuck them into what I consider the direct and indirect. So that's why if you are already familiar with Defink, you might think, okay, this table is a little different. It is. I adapted it from his. So this experience, we want to help them to do something. Well, in some ways, they're definitely doing. In some ways, they might be observing. And so here's just some ideas, and you're reading through them as I'm talking about them. So you're kind of interacting with the content in two different ways now, where you're hearing me talk about it and you're visually reading about them. Hopefully you're thinking a little bit about how you can incorporate these into your courses. But allowing them to maybe experience something in an authentic setting. But if it can't be in an authentic setting, maybe there's some way that you can create a simulation. We have some e-learning folks in the session today, and that's kind of what they do. They help folks out with creating these simulations and other experiences that students may be able to do without being able to tap into those authentic settings. A direct observation or of a phenomenon. Observing seems sort of passive, but in some cases it's not, because we want the students maybe to observe a piece of artwork or a performance or something like that, or maybe even a dangerous scientific observation that we sort of just kind of want to watch them observe for a while. So again, give them ways to reflect on it, and it can be in a variety of different ways. And I think we've kind of touched on these already. But I want to give you another opportunity to do. And I noticed we had some very eager whiteboard participants early on. Now you have permission to use the whiteboard. So let's just do a quick practice. If you'd like to try, at the top of your screen, there is a big T, which you can click on and add some text to the whiteboard. You can change the color. I see some names popping up there. I actually just added one with a white text. That didn't do me any good. Awesome. Thank you for introducing yourself on the whiteboard. I'm going to clear that out. Let's try some shapes. The box at the top will allow you to create some different types of shapes. Awesome ovals. Look, a couple rectangles in there. You have all mastered the whiteboard already. And so now I'm going to give you an opportunity to use your new whiteboard skills to help sort of grade, again, my role-playing activity here. I'm going to clear them out because I want you to circle certain aspects of my contemporary health activity here. First of all, I want to know if you feel like I addressed sharing how this activity aligns with a learning objective in the course. Perhaps a learning activity, or maybe even how it aligns with an assessment. Those are action plan, excellent. You know, I like to make sure that students know this is going to involve some doing. Yes, I love it too. I see a green box around an alignment to learning objectives 4 and 5. Did I align this activity or let the students know how this activity aligned to any assessments? Why is it relevant to them? Excellent, blue rectangle. Is there any way that I am allowing the students to help this be more relevant to them and possibly even reflect on their own experiences? I have to tell you, very, very good boxes. And I think I'm doing pretty well with this activity. And everyone is doing really well. I just wanted to point out that if this looks small, I've tried to blow it up kind of as big as possible. You can click on the slide and it'll make it a little bit bigger, or you can use your control plus or control minus to kind of open up or narrow this too if you're having difficulty. Thank you for the smiley face, whoever gave me the smiley face. Can you think of anything else that would help really foster any of the types of interactions that we talked about? And you can probably add that to the text chat area. You can add it in text on the whiteboard too. Colors, okay. So maybe make the font different colors to make different things stand out. I like that idea. And I know there's sort of a lot to read and comb through here. This is one of my all-time favorite workshops. I love to do this because everybody's sort of so engaged and into it. And I think this opportunity to kind of really play around on the Blackboard helps you kind of read through it and pick out the important pieces. That said, you could provide questions for students to discuss in a separate discussion board to build community outside the course. Sure, especially there's a different workshop that I discuss allowing students to kind of go over their muddiest points. I should say a different one. It may come up on the slide too, and that will help them maybe ask questions and talk about maybe what they're not understanding, and then the other students can also support them on that. Add optional resources here. Very good suggestion. Thank you. Thanks, Beth. I like the muddy idea. It was always presented to me as the muddiest point, and it has a lot of meaning to me, and also kind of almost gives you permission to say, "Ooh, you know what? I really didn't get this, and you know maybe others didn't." So, can really help out. Most confusing point, sure. Thank you for that, Janet. And then, of course, we want to make sure that we give the students time to make meaning. And so I've added this scenario down here, and we only have 4 minutes left, so I want to go over it really briefly. The idea is that students look at health in two different ways. And so looking at it two different ways not only allows them to make meaning for themselves, but maybe for a broader community. So this is actually a kind of sad story about a woman that lost her twins, and so that's a very personal story, and it's so personal. It's very much looking at Sarita's health, her physical health, and her mental health going forward. But also, there's a different construct of a broader perspective of health, and so allowing students to see that there might be these different perspectives might help them have a stronger connection to what this project is about. Lacey says, I like how the case study approach avoids ethical issues of asking students to self-disclose health issues. There are a lot of dangers in personalizing sensitive topics. We run into this in psychology a lot, yes. Even if they are making meaning and it becomes very personal and close to them, this gives us an opportunity to kind of not have them share what they may be uncomfortable with sharing. Janet said, I wonder if you give students time to gather one story each about a topic, then the entire class could select one that they worked on collaboratively. That sounds like a great idea, and they would be learning from each other. Again, kind of building that community and diving into like maybe smaller topics as a small group or individually, but then learning about really a broader perspective. Love that idea. So I do want to give you an opportunity to reflect again about what you have learned in this workshop and what you may use in your online course, and that what types of interactions will you promote. Maybe there's one type of interaction that you feel could use a little bit more strengthening. And now some of these ideas that we've really all shared this afternoon will be something that you can incorporate into your course. Love the role-playing activity. Thank you. And any feedback you have for me on ways to improve this workshop or the activity, or maybe an activity that you think would be a good example, please, I'd love to hear from you. Another way I'd like to hear from you is in our workshop survey. I just put a link into the text chat area. So as you're reflecting a little bit, if you could fill out that survey, or I'll send it in the link later with my thank you to all of you this afternoon. So if you'd rather do it later, that's fine too, but I'd love the feedback. I did say this connected to Quality Matters Standard number 5, which is course activities. So I'm just going to wrap up what all of these mean to Quality Matters, and by kind of wrapping up this big, huge question. So quality courses provide students with an opportunity to engage in active learning activities which promote the achievement of the learning objectives, that foster interaction with you, the other students, and the content that support active learning, with clearly communicated faculty response time in conjunction with a faculty feedback plan, along with the interaction requirements for engagement. If you start to incorporate these activities into your course, you will be that much closer into having a Quality Matters online course that addresses course activities and student engagement. And we are past our hour at this point, so I want to make sure that I thank you again. You see the summary of what we talked about today. But I also want to reintroduce myself and invite you to contact me if you'd like to have more conversations about this. Tracy Miller at tracy.miller@niu.edu. Thank you and have an amazing day.